Gauteng's water woes continue. Now, last week, authorities warned Gauteng residents that the water system is strained. This is due to high demand. Now, residents in Johannesburg metros were encouraged to lower their water consumption as storage levels in reservoirs dropped rapidly. Joburg Mayor Dada Morero promised residents that water supply will be restored within the next 7 days. For more on this now, let's bring in Johannesburg Water Spokesperson Nombuso Shabalala, who joins us on Teams. Ms. Shabalala, thank you so much for your time this hour. So, has the system recovered and which areas are completely without water?
Good morning, Mbolisi, and good morning to your viewers, and thank you very much for the opportunity. So last week we were impacted by two significant incidents that impacted supply to some of the areas in Johannesburg. City Power had a trip at their Orlando substation, and this impacted pumping at Randwater's Aikenhof station. And followed by that was Emfuleni as well, which suffered a total power failure. And this also impacted Randwater's pumping to Aikenhof and to its Forest Hills reservoir. And so this meant that some of our reservoirs and towers then were affected to a point where we could not supply. So as at this morning, a lot of areas have recovered, but I will just maybe mention the areas that are still critically impacted with low to no water supply. So our system in Hurst Hill, in Crown Gardens, in Berea, in Yeoville, in Forest Hill, and in Lenasia are still critically impacted, and we are currently supplying water supply in those areas through our water tankers.
So will the water system be fully restored by the end of the week as promised?
Correct, Mbolisi. As the mayor mentioned at our press briefing on Friday, that within 7 days, water will be restored. And as we are seeing from Friday to date, there are systems that have recovered. And as our system builds capacity, more and more areas will have its water supply restored.
And we also heard about how some were also complaining that their areas were actually most affected but were not even mentioned in the initial communique, which is exactly why we also asked some of our viewers to actually call us now on 011 714 0661 0662 or 0663. Perhaps, Ms. Shabalala, if you can just give us an overview of what actually caused the strain in the system. How did we find ourselves here?
Okay, so Mbolisi, as I mentioned in my intro about the two significant incidents that impacted supply in some areas in Johannesburg. So that is the power trip at City Power's Orlando substation, which impacted our bulk supplier, together with the Emfuleni total power failure that happened. But also important to mention is that our system was already vulnerable. So these two incidents really set us back.
Yeah, but one would also assume that, planning really does make sure that none of this actually happens. Was there proper planning that was actually done to ensure that we don't get to this point? And there has been maintenance taking place at several pump stations. How has this helped improve the water system?
So that's quite true. Maintenance is ongoing, but because our systems are interdependent, and viewers would ask, why would something that happens at Emfuleni affect Randwater, affect Johannesburg? That's because of the nature of our systems being interconnected, and also because water and electricity are connected. To the issue of maintenance, as we've been communicating, Mbolisi, we have aged infrastructure in the city, and there are various interventions and projects underway to address this challenge. Our aged infrastructure, you see it with the frequent pipe bursts, for example, and our old water pipelines, which leads to leaks and bursts. So the issue of underinvestment in our infrastructure is being addressed at all levels of government. So the city, the province, and more recently national. You would remember when during the SONA, President Ramaphosa did outline the plans that our national government and national treasury have in place to significantly increase investment in infrastructure in the water and sanitation space, not only in Johannesburg, but around the country.
And areas such as Observatory, Kensington, Cyril Dean, Bruma, as well as other areas complain about intermittent water cuts. Are there areas that will never be restored as we're having this conversation?
Certainly, we will not have areas that will never be restored. The areas that you are mentioning, which are towards the east of the city, so Bruma, Cyril Dean, Kensington, are affected by our Berea and Yeoville systems that were impacted earlier in the week. But also, we do have high consumption in certain areas of the city, which also exacerbates the situation, therefore affecting our supply to those areas. But as the mayor mentioned, we will have water supplied within 7 days as more systems and as more areas recover.
And where should residents complain, and how can they reach out to you?
So we communicate via our social media platforms. Residents can also call the City of Johannesburg call center and our call center as well. We've got a mini call center at Johannesburg Water. But also, more importantly, we collaborate with ward councillors of the affected areas, where we would send updates. For example, Region F would be where Bruma, Cyril Dean, and some of the areas that we've mentioned. So in those groups, we would then give councillors a list of where we will be placing alternative water supply in the form of tankers.
And as that famous saying goes, Ms. Shabalala, failure to plan is planning to fail. Should we expect maintenance to affect water supply in the near future, and how should we plan going forward?
So in the short term, there are certain interventions, but in the long term, there are big plans and significant funding that is being provided to Johannesburg Water through the City of Johannesburg. And so maybe important to mention is that we are also building certain reservoirs and powers in order to augment supply. So in April this year, the construction of the new Brixton Reservoir and Tower will be completed. So some of those projects we are aiming or trying to address the issue of water supply challenges. But definitely in the short to medium term, there are definitely plans at all levels of government to ensure that in the City of Johannesburg, we have less water interruptions.
So in a nutshell, Ms. Shabalala, all these problems can be attributed to all these budgetary constraints that you're experiencing, but also there's work in the pipeworks to ensure that we get over this, correct?
That is very correct. So addressing our aging infrastructure will greatly improve our water supply in the city.
All right, that was Johannesburg Water spokesperson Nombuso Shabalala joining us there on Teams. Thank you ever so much for your time.